All right, let's look at creating the enemy that's going to follow the paths, find our enemy, find our player. It's just going to patrol the hallways, and when it sees the player, it's going to chase towards them, obviously reducing their life. So let's go ahead and add an object, enemy patroller. And I'll use the enemy sprite for now. I'm going to add an event, a create event, and in the create event, oops, it's going a little bit laggy for me. In the create event, we're going to have set up initial variables, and enemy health equals 5, enemy speed equals 4. Now what we could do here is say object player speed. If we want them to be able to match the player speed and say we change the player speed, we might just set it to 4 for now though, but we could do something different. And here I'm going to just put a comment, set target for enemy to patrol to 0, 0 is only for initializing these variables. Okay, so enemy target X, I'm just going to call it enemy X equals 0 and enemy Y equals 0. So what these two variables are is it's going to be, I'm going to call it target X because that doesn't make much sense. Enemy X, enemy Y implies just the X and Y that we've already got there. Okay, so what these two variables are, every time at the start of the game, it's going to pick a random location to patrol to, and when it reaches the end of the path, it's going to pick a new XY coordinate to patrol to, and then we'll use the MP grid pathfinding functions to create a path and assign that path to the enemy object. So last year you would have used paths. We had those little spaceships flying along a path. When they got to the end of the path, we made them repeat the path. This time when it gets to the end of the path, we're going to create a new path for it to go to a different location. So that's that part there. And for the second part, I am going to create an initial path. So if I do this, set up initial, I guess, path. So what I'm doing here is creating a loop. And the while loop works like this. So I've got while some condition, don't worry about what's in there at the moment, while some condition is true, like an if statement, if MO is greater than 0, whatever, while the condition is true, do the stuff within here. Now what I've essentially put here is a true statement. Okay, so I've just typed the word true. Now true is always true, just like false is always false, but true is always true. And that means that it will do the stuff in here forever. Now, I don't want it to do it forever. What I want it to do is to find a XY position in the room that is empty. Now, there are lots of ways to do it, but this is a really quick way of doing it. What I'm going to do is just keep on searching through and randomizing XY positions. And as soon as it finds one that is empty, it's going to break out of this loop. Now, theoretically, that means that it could actually loop forever, but in practice, it won't. Okay, so it could randomly, constantly pick positions in the wall. However, in practice, that will never happen. Just the way that the randomization algorithm works within the computer, it's not truly random, so eventually it will pick somewhere that is not in a wall, and it will usually not be even noticeable. Okay, so enemy target X equals, I'm going to give it a random range between 0 and the room width. And the enemy target Y equals random range 0 and the room height. Now, because of the way random range works, it doesn't return an integer or a whole number. It returns a fraction. So what I want to do is to make sure that I make it into an integer by using the function called floor. So floor will take a number and then lower it, round it down. There is a function called ceiling, which will round it up, but it doesn't matter which way I round it in this case. I just want to get a whole number from it. So looking at this here, random range, 0 room width, that might return 55.6. And then the floor function takes one argument, which is a value, and it'll take that 55.6 that this generates and then turn it into 55. So it'll just round it down, get rid of the thing off the end. So that's all good. So I've got a random X and Y position for the enemy target to go to. But now I need to check if that place is empty. So if the place is empty, enemy target X, and place empty takes two arguments, an X position and a Y position. So for the X position, I'm going to plug that in. And for the Y position, I'm going to say check this as your Y position. So if that place is empty, I'm going to break out of the loop. That's going to be my target. Okay. If it's not empty, it'll just repeat this again with two new values. If it is empty, it will break. Okay. Break means exit the loop. Okay. So I don't need to set like a special variable. Like I could write it this way. I could say var I or var loop or something like that. While, and then go equals true. And this is a long way of doing it. Loop equals true. So while loop is equal to true. So I set it to true. I say while it's equal to true. And then I say loop equals false. Okay, and then loop's not true anymore. It'll exit the loop. But I can do all the same stuff with less code and less variables just by doing that and breaking it. Normally you do not want to create an infinite loop. But there are times when it's useful. Find a location with nothing in it. Okay, usually infinite loops are a result of an error in the code. In this case, I purposely put it in. It's all good. Now, enemy path, this is going to be a variable equals path add. I'm going to add an empty path and assign it this variable name. Then I'm going to use the MP grid path, and I'm going to say grid, because that's a global variable, I can use it. Enemy path is going to be the path that I use. You'll see MP grid path. This is going to create a path for us, by the way. And it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 functions. Now, if I just bring up the health, MP grid, sorry, the help, MP grid path, ID. Okay, so that's the name of the grid that we want to use. Then we've got the path, so the index of the path, and that's that there. So index, when you look at the health, the help here, index often refers to a variable name that you've given something. Okay, so enemy path, that's the path that I've given it. The X start is just going to be X, and the Y start is just going to be Y. So that's wherever the enemy is, that's going to be its starting position. We don't want it teleporting around to go to new places. And X, Y, its ending position, however, or the goal is enemy target X. And the Y goal is enemy target Y. Now, do I want to allow diagonals? No, I don't. Not at the moment. When it's chasing the player, I do. And then we want to go path start, enemy path, that's the path that's going to start, enemy speed, path action stop, and when it gets to the end, we want it to be absolute. So it's going to say true there. So that's what's going to happen when it gets to the end. This is the path that it's going to take. That's the speed it's going to take. That's what's going to happen when it gets to the end of the path. It's going to stop. And true, we want it to be absolute. We want it to start the path from the position of the player. I don't want to get into the whole relative absolute issue at the moment. But now we can test this out. We go add event, draw, and we put in a bit of code and just say draw path, I think. Draw path, yep. And the path that we want to draw is the enemy path. We just want to draw it from the X, Y, true. And now I know that I need to put this in because I've tried this before. If path exists, enemy path, draw the path. All right, now what this will do, it's in the draw code. It's just a test. We can delete it later. But if the path exists, it's going to draw the path. Now, one last thing I need to do here is just make the fog invisible for now. And I probably should put one of those enemies in the room, because this is not going to work. So I go here, objects, grab an enemy patroller. It's that guy there. And it should just draw that path. Okay, he's actually disappeared. There's a reason for that. When you do this, when you do a draw function, you have to put draw self in there as well if you want it to show up. So you should see he'll go along there, move up, gets to the end, and he stops like we told him to. So what we want him to do at the end of the path, well, this is really easy, this part. We go add event, other, path end. There should be, here we go, end of path. We're just going to duplicate this entire bit of code here. Copy, paste, and I'll go in and say create new path target. So what will happen now, I'll run it, and I'll have to remember to turn that fog back on at the end, and my views. So I run it, and you'll get to the end of this path, and it crashes. Well, that's not cool. So I wonder why it's doing that. It's just it's actually frozen the whole game. So let's have a look here. End of path, create new path target. Enemy target X equals that. That's interesting. I'll have to have a look at why it's doing that, but I'll get rid of this here. Delete that. And let's just try running that again, seeing. Where's he gone? I don't know where he actually went that time. I'm going to delete the other objects from the room. It is that one. So I'm not actually sure where his goal is. Must be somewhere in here. Okay, alright. So I'm going to pause the video and see why it's doing that. Okay, I think I figured out what the issue is here. This place here, place empty, should be place free. And the reason for that is because of the fog, which I don't have there. Place empty checks if anything's there. Place free only checks for solid. So I want to, I'll just get rid of all that stuff. It was just me debugging the program. So yeah, I want to check for place free. That way if there's no walls there, it will set it. So I'll need to put that in here as well. Place free. And that should work. Now I'll just test that. It should get to the end of its path, and then if all is well, it should just continue on. Oh, it's going to chase me. No, it's not going to chase me. Okay, so that definitely worked because it's coming back a different location. If it was meant to go to there from there, it would have taken that path first. So it's looking like it's working pretty well. It's kind of patrolling, moving around. All right, so that's good. Gets to the end of the path, starts a new one. So that was my problem. I was checking place empty instead of place free. So now what I need to do is make it so it can find the player. And that's going to be a step event. And I'm going to put some code in here. And I'm going to call it find player. Now what I need to do is draw a line to the player and see if there's anything in the way. So if collision line, once again, the starting position is XY of the enemy. The player, so I'm going to is the object player.x object, or the XY of the object player. So the dot says it belongs to object player. So X that belongs to object player, Y that belongs to object player. I want to check if there's walls in the way. I don't need to be precise, and I don't want to check itself. So equals no one. If that is true, then if the distance, because I don't want it to just be running at you from miles away, if the distance to the object obj player is less than 150. Now keep in mind, it doesn't really matter if you check the collision line first or the distance to the player. It's not going to be any major difference in processing power or processing requirements. So if the distance to the object player is less than 150, then we set the target to the object player.x, enemy target y equals object player.y, and then we put the path on it again. Enemy path equals path add. That just clears the path that was there out. MP grid path, same line as before. Grid enemy path start position, end position, enemy target x, enemy target y. And we're going to allow diagonals this time when it's chasing the player. Otherwise, it looks really bizarre. So we're going to allow diagonals and then start that path. Path start x, y, oops, enemy path, enemy speed, path action stop, and absolute is going to be true. So now it will chase the player. So let's test that. Okay, so if I go and find it, there we go. You can see that it's chasing me now. If I get far enough away from it, yeah, it loses me and goes back to patrolling. All right, so now I need to turn the fog back on. I'll put a few of these patrollers in the room. Objects, enemy patroller. Maybe that's probably enough of those. It's going to be pretty hard to outrun them. The fog is turned back on. Okay, so the fog's working. And I'll go back into the room and enable the use of views again. Okay, so this thing's chasing me straight from the start. I've got two of them on me now, and it's going to be pretty hard to outrun them here. But it looks like I can get a bit of speed. Got three of them. Oh no. Okay, so they've all caught me. Maybe I need to make them move a bit slower. But as you can see, the health bar doesn't go down. So that's your job. To fix that up, it shouldn't be too difficult. You can look back at some existing code that you've already got, make it so the health bar goes down when these enemies touch the player. I might actually just change some settings in here, in the view, to 512 by 250, not 250, what's 192 times 2? 192 times 2, 384. 384. It's just, there's not much vision that's happening here. I can't see a whole lot. That's probably a bit better there. Yeah. All right. I got eaten already. Okay. So fix that up so that the health bar goes down, and you're done with this one.